Welcome to the Women's Maker Program Speaker Series. I'm Jennifer O'Brien Roper, Director for Digital Strategies at the University of Virginia Library. Along with Fong Yi and Maggie Nunley, I'm a member of a team overseeing the Spring 2020 Women's Maker Program. This is the inaugural year for the program, which aims to support first and second year students in pursuit of STEM careers. The 6 fellows in the program are getting experience with a variety of tools in our makerspace and will be seeking to solve a community-based problem through a self-identified project. In addition to a tangible result and practical experience, we hope the program increases their interest in makerspace technologies and starts to build a community of women in this space. The program, including today's event, is supported by the University of Virginia Library and generously funded through the Charles L. Brown Endowment. The library is also seeking to more broadly increase diversity in our spaces through the Inclusive Maker Group. This group focuses on making culture, connecting mentors and peers, and working creatively and on projects for our community. The Inclusive Maker Group provides the opportunity to meet, collaborate, and connect with others that share experiences as students, scholars, and makers. If you're interested in joining the Inclusive Maker Group, please contact Maggie Nunley. I'm now delighted to introduce the second speaker in our series, hearing about women in academia and industry and their journey in STEM. Melissa Goldman is the Fabrication Lab Manager at the UVA School of Architecture. From crafting new tools and materials to designing and building gigantic moving creatures, Melissa has an excitement for building and making at all scales. Her work combines an interest in new building materials, hacking tools, and playing with digital fabrication equipment like industrial robots and 3D printers. She has taught seminars in digital fabrication, design robotics, and creature building. Her career path has traveled through set and puppet design, architecture, and fabrication. Due to the current COVID-19 pandemic, most of the shops, labs, and makerspaces have switched from helping students to creating personal protective equipment, or PPE, for UVA medical staff and supporting the local community. Melissa is one of the leading forces for prototyping, mass producing, and delivering PPE right now. We're fortunate to have her share both her background in making as well as her current efforts on making PPE. So without further ado, let's welcome Melissa.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all virtually like this. And thank you to Fong and Jennifer for setting this up and for continuing to invite me to do this talk. So I have a number of things to show you today. I'm really passionate about the work that I do and about being a maker. And so stop me at any point if you have questions or you want to jump in on something. I can talk for a long time about the things that I'm very passionate about, but I want to talk to you a little bit about my path today, how I got to being a Fab Lab manager. What does that even mean? And what is the thing that's been driving me through design and making through my career so far. And then I'll talk a little bit about the kind of work that we do in the lab. I think some of you have been over, which is great. I recognize some of you. And hopefully when we're all back on grounds, you can all come back and check out more things that we're doing. And then I'll talk a little bit about the PPE efforts and can answer any of those questions, like what is UVA doing and who are we servicing? So I will share my screen and hopefully this will play videos and all sorts of things. But if something is not working on your end, please let me know and we'll go from there. Sound good? All right, cool. And I apologize in advance. I made some of these slides before the pandemic and the era of Zoom. So I know that that means sometimes you have to put your windows in different places in order to see the whole slide, but feel free to kind of move things around. I might move you all around so that I can see your faces kind of as we go, but it should work just fine. So I'm calling this talk Building Bridges and Making Your Community, because this is something as I was putting together my work, I was like, what is the thing that has really been kind of building my path through all of these different industries? You know, they were asking me the question, Fong and Jennifer, they said, how did you get into your career in STEM? I was like, through the humanities. And through the arts. And I was thinking about it, I was like, how did I actually get to where I am? Because I was doing robots and I was doing architecture and I was doing STEM, I was doing humanities, I was doing theater, I was doing a little bit of everything. And so I'm not just a Fab Lab manager, I'm a maker, I am a designer, I have my Master's of Architecture degree, so I'm a fabricator, I'm a theater techie, I'm a set designer, a puppet designer, in all sorts of scales. My background, as an undergrad, I was an English concentrator at Harvard, and that got me into actually a lot of making, a lot of analysis, a lot of asking questions and making questions about how we look at our world and how we can help in different ways. And I put on here, I'm also a roller derby official. I don't know if any of you are on the UVA team at all, or if you even knew that there was a UVA roller derby team. There is. And I have been an official with the Charlottesville Derby Dames for about 10 years. And it's been another community, and I'll get into that in a bit, that I have found has really helped and inspired me as a maker. So opening new doors is something that we frequently talk about, is like, will this open a door to another career? Will this open a door to another opportunity? But opening new doors is a singular experience. It takes one hand to turn that knob. But building bridges, on the other hand, is a communal experience. And making is inherently a communal history, it's a communal culture, and it is a communal experience. And it's really critical in being a professional maker and a professional fabricator that is true. And so a little bit about, I'm sorry, can you actually see yourself on my screen, or can you see the slides on the screen? If you can see the slides, just give me a thumbs up. Cool. When I realized, I was like, maybe they can see themselves moving around on this screen. All right. I'll talk a little bit about the Fab Lab at UVA, the thing that I've been running and building for the last decade at the School of Architecture. So you might think of fabrication labs or wood shops or maker spaces as places with tools in them. You can go into them, you might be able to get access, you might have to go through safety training, but really what it is a communal nexus of making things. It is a communal nexus of knowledge, it's a communal nexus of experience. And so the Fab Lab at UVA, though we service all of the 5 departments that are within the School of Architecture, which is architecture, landscape architecture, urban planning, and architectural history and preservation in our PhD program. We are working all throughout grounds with all of the different other maker spaces in order to produce things that are tiny block models to furniture scale things to full scale buildings. And part of my team, what we do is we teach everyone from the very beginnings where you're like, that's a spinning blade. I don't know what that's all about. So I think Isabel was saying earlier that she had come to one of our training sessions and learned how to use some of the tools and cut out a wooden heart, and sand it down into something. But for us, it's getting that training on all the tools that kind of start to break down barriers and just make these sets of tools available to the larger audience, something that you can have in your back pocket as a design driver, and getting your hands on all of these different things. So these are our spaces. This is our wood shop. We went through a renovation last summer, and we expanded 3 times the size of what we were before. But the wood shop's really our heart, and this is where people get trained from the get-go, and where we introduce people with training. And I have a whole host of TAs, undergrads and grads from all over UVA, as well as the school, or the school as well as UVA, who are there as experts to help you with projects that you might be excited about. And it's really building those resources that are really important to us as we build out our community of the Fab Lab, and not just the spaces with the tools in them. We have the Open Lab, which it has a number of tools in it, like laser cutters, sewing machines, embroidery machines, 3D printer fleet of all different types and flavors, as in 24/7 space for people to actually just spread out and start to work. We have our Fab Lab Studios that I'm sitting in actually right now. And these are spaces where classes are held. So they're like classrooms or studio spaces. If you've ever been in the A school, there are residential desks that our students get, or some of our students get, in order to do one of their main classes. And those classes that are most specifically geared towards materials and making and experimental fabrication can be housed in a semester down here. And then they can build big. And that's the goal, is to kind of build out prototypes at a scale that might be bigger than your desk. And we have a place called the Garage where we have our robot fleet and a number of work tables, and things are kind of constantly moving around in order to build large. And we have a number of other spaces, our CNC router, metal 3D printer, which is new on grounds, casting spaces, various other places where we can start to build in the large scale. And as I was saying, we build small models where you would normally think you're like a school of architecture. What are they making? It's models that do look like buildings. It's landscapes that are then tested. It's structures that are then tested to fail. It's all sorts of pieces and parts that are put together in order to start a conversation. Some people make a design through making, and other people kind of use it as a way to get feedback. But we also kind of build on the large scale. So I don't know if some of you saw this on the lawn a couple of years ago as part of the bicentennial of the university. But it's called Lumina. It was a large pavilion that we built. But we're building full scale things all the time. And it's something that's really important to us, that we get that experience, so that when, as a designer, you are working with people, maybe you're not the one who's physically building, but you're working with people and talking to people who are, and you can have that conversation in a really great way in order to move forward. We also bring in a whole host of what we call our innovators in practice. So I've always said to the deans, I said, lecture series are great. And they are wonderful. Like, I'm really excited to talk to you today. But I will be even more excited to make with you later. And when you bring in someone who is at the top of their field and they're a maker, you want to make with them. It's kind of like a chef. You don't want to just bring a chef into your home and then have them talk at you about food, right? You want to cook with them, you want to bake with them, and then you want to eat with them. And so that's what we do. So we've had a number of people come in who are experts in fields of robotics and construction. You see in the bottom right, Billy Bryan is one of our creature experts. He's a trash bag technologist in Hollywood. He was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in Ghostbusters. We've had people in the community like Casey Kerrigan from Osh, where we're 3D printing shoes. And a whole host of others that are constantly coming through our Fab Lab to kind of inject new energy and bring in conversations and tools that we can use as we go forward. And this is now, I think, an old map. Fung, I don't even know if you're on this map. We need to update it. I think it's there a little bit, but this is Maker Grounds. Very soon after I got to UVA, I said, where are the friends that I can have who also have tools that we can make in? And for us, we reached out to Arts Grounds. I'll get into that. But there are makers all over UVA, and they are all open to our larger community of UVA, students, faculty, and staff in one way or another. And so if you're like, I haven't been over to that part of grounds before, or I don't know how to get in there, you can go to makergrounds.virginia.edu and you can email them. You can find out their background. You can find out a little bit about what their offerings are. You can sign up for the email listserv and start to get where the tutorials are if you're here next year, and start to learn. So that's a really exciting moment. So it was asked, how did you get into making? I am a daughter of a math teacher and a sculpture teacher. And so it's always been something that I have done in order to learn or understand the world around me. And so whether those were intricate Halloween costumes or making worlds kind of in my house, when I got to college, I wanted to be in tech theater. I did it as a high school student. I was a stage manager, and I really loved building things, and loved building big things. And so when I got to Harvard, there was not at the time a department. This was all extracurricular work, but it was something that was really passionate among the student body. And it was a great opportunity to get into the lab and learn how to use power tools and work with people. So these are a few designs that I did and built with friends of mine in our drama community at Harvard. We had really amazing resources. This was a production of The Physicists, which I always had very strange scripts thrown at me as a set designer. This script, it was like, we were going to have an insane asylum with 3 men who think that they are physicists, but they are not, and talk about the end of the world. And I was like, yeah, okay. And people get murdered. And I'm like, okay. And there's this really these dramatic scenes and these power plays of different characters. And we kind of like the aesthetic of old, broken down, insane asylums. I was like, yeah, great, with you. Okay. So as a designer, you kind of take all that, you're looking for precedents, and you're looking for materials on a student budget of how you can build something that is, 75 feet by 50 feet in only a couple of weeks with a very limited budget. And this show featured this 50-foot roof in a forced perspective, made basically out of cheap 1x4 lumber and painter's plastic. So those sheets of painter's plastic that you can buy at the hardware store, you can buy it in large sheets, and you can staple it to things. And it really is beautiful when you light behind it. And it can create a lot of great dramatic lighting effects, but it can cover a lot of space very, very cheaply. And so we spent about 3 to 4 weeks building this show. And what was great about it, it was my first show on the largest stage that Harvard has, is that my tech director, because it was all extracurricular, my tech directors were from the government department, computer science, and economics. My lighting designer was from social studies and computer science. My costumer was from the creative writing program in English, and the director was in a special concentration on direction and translation. And so there was just a whole host of people that were becoming that crew that I was starting to work with. And as I became a designer, I wanted to challenge them. So every new show that I had, I wanted to challenge them in what could we build now? How can we make, what have we learned? And so one of the next shows, I had a director come to me and he said, all right, we're gonna do Antigone, the Greek tragedy. And I'm giving you 3 photos, and that's all I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna give you a picture of Dick Cheney. I'm gonna give you a picture of Hillary Duff, and I'm gonna give you a picture of Avril Lavigne. I was like, yeah, okay, great. That and the script is clearly enough to go with. I will figure something out. And he says, and the budget's $500. I'm like, okay, that sounds excellent. Let's go. And this was in our black box theater. And I had the same crew. And we had this technique of lighting very dramatically through something. And a friend of mine was on our newspaper, the Harvard Crimson. And at the time they were making newspaper on negatives. So it wasn't online and it wasn't digital printing yet. It was still being produced into these negatives that then would become the positive of the physical newspaper. And from this pop culture and political references, I said, I want to get those negatives in and I want to light behind them. And I want that to be the texture between all of these different spaces on the stage that people would be in. And the Greek chorus was a bunch of college students, and that was the idea. And so it's like, let's give them a room and have them surrounded by the comics and the the crossword puzzles and some of the more social aspects of the newspaper. Not that anyone got that close to the set, but it was just something that was in the texture of each of these rooms. The main, I guess, antagonist in the show, who was kind of a political figure, had all of like the front page political news and the military news at the time. And then the bedroom of our protagonist were things like film about the movie stars and getting kind of fame, and it was the sections of the newspaper just kind of like filled out really nicely, and they made this really great texture that kind of fit for the whole show. So it was non-traditional materials that we were starting to play with, and how do you start to change kind of your immersive environment with just some of the materials that you're seeing around you. I got really into playing with materials that don't normally go on stage. So whether that was collecting thousands of wine bottles for a show, a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta of the gondoliers, or it was paper macheing wood slats in the color of Toulouse-Lautrec green for Tartuffe, a production of Tartuffe, or puppets and sets for Alice in Wonderland, or the Oresteia, using a literal ton of mulch on stage. These were the kind of things that I was just playing with as a young designer and a young maker. And my crew was there to say, yeah, I'm in one class, I'm working on history, and we're analyzing text, and I'm totally with you and looking at the script and going with that. And then in another, I had some students who were in a structures class, and they were figuring out how everything could be cut and fit together and would be structural for people to stand on, sit on, climb out of, things that would fall. The middle top picture is from Alice in Wonderland, and that whole proscenium with doors started upright at the beginning of the show and then falls in the middle of the show. And we had to do it safely and figure that all out. So that was really fun. So then I went from this really collaborative environment that was all extracurricular, and we were trying to all figure it out, to grad school, where I said I wanted a bigger stage and better lighting, and I went to school for architecture. I got my master's of architecture degree at Columbia, and this was a culture shock for me in a lot of ways, because the architecture school and where I went, I'm not saying every architecture school, but the program I was in, it was very much about individual development, and collaborations were about critiquing each other. It was like, give me feedback. What are you seeing of my work that is flawed? Or what are you seeing of my work that could be better? And so our desks were, I like to say that Columbia in New York is a microcosm of New York City. So everything is small. So you're building at the size of your laptop or your desktop at the time, and of a 2 foot by not even 4 foot desk. And you got one of these every semester, and this is where your entire life was and would unfold. And so I learned how to make weird models like this out of various crazy materials. I learned how to make diagrams and drawings like these ones, where we talked very eloquently about them and their theses and if they were legible. But it was very much about your work and how you interpreted your work, and how you learned programs, and how you were able to translate these ideas that were in your head into something else. They were renderings like this, whether that was structure or was more of an abstract rendering. Yes, those are goats. And this was a conversation that was strangely foreign to me, because I was struggling to develop my work as a maker and as a designer while only being internal. It was so much thinking internally in my head that really those conversations were very much of, do it again, do more iterations, do the next step. And there was rarely a chance for me to then say, all right, how do we as a group kind of come together in order to make? And making was so small that wasn't really part of what I was doing. And then I met this guy and I fell in love. This is a CNC router. It's a 3-axis CNC router. We have 2 of them at the School of Architecture. How many of you have used one of these before? You can just raise your hand. I see you on your screens. No one's used one? Oh man, they're so fun. So if you think about graph paper, you have your X and Y axis, right? And so this tool has a spinning blade on the end of it. It spins at about 18,000 revolutions a minute, and kind of it's routing is the verb, and it cuts out whatever your digital model is. So if you think of graph paper, it can move in your X direction, it can move in your Y direction, and the 3rd axis is moving up and down out of the page in what is called Z. And I met the CNC router for a project, and these are my first 2 routes. One of them is a duck. It's a 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch plywood duck. And the other one was a piece of corian, which is usually used for countertop material. Some of you might have a kitchen at home that has corian countertops, and it routes like butter. It's so beautiful. And then you can put it in your oven at 350 for 15 minutes, and you can basically manipulate it as if it were rubber. And you put it under water, cold water, and it hardens in place. And so the models that I was creating, I was like, these materials can now be manipulated in a completely different way than I ever thought that they could be. And this is where I also found a whole community kind of in our Fab Lab. We had a small woodshop, we had a small CNC lab. They were separate at the time. And I just flourished in that environment. I said, this is where making is communal. And so I started making tools. This is a rotational molder that I made. And after making it, I was showing people what it could do. And more students were saying, hey, could I come down? Could I work with you? Could I do these projects? I was like, yeah, let's do it. And through some of my other classes, we were making products. We were making other types of models. On the right are rotationally molded concrete structures. So they make thin shells. As it rotates, it creates kind of a thin shell of a material or of a mold. And so the middle is hollow. So we got all of these, what we called cloudcrete, which was for a class. I was developing processes that people thought I was the mad scientist in studio. The middle picture is just hot glue on water balloons in a water bath, so that the balloons don't explode while you put the hot glue on them. And it was creating these networks that then started to aggregate, and that became part of the way that I was making and designing. And on the left is a heat gunned or a heat treated lamp that we made over a honeydew melon. And so these were things that we were, doing in various places in our studio, and we were trying to learn how to make even out of little material. Isabel, do you have a question? Yeah, go for it.
I didn't want to interrupt you. One of our fellows is actually in the waiting room, and she's excited to hear you today, so I wanted to make that clear. So
that doesn't pop up on my screen. Fong, are you able to bring her in? Let's see. Yeah, I don't think I have that ability. All right. By all means, jet on in again if you see another person who's trying to get in or whatnot. All right, great. Thank you, Fong. So after figuring out that what I really needed was a community of makers, I came to UVA in 2011 and immediately reached out to other people and other makers who were around grounds. And the first two people I met with were on arts grounds. So if you've been to arts grounds, the School of Architecture is up on a hill, and just down the hill is the drama department and the studio art department. And the people like me there, one at studio art is named Eric Schmidt, and the one at drama at the time and now has a bigger team is named Steve Warner. And the three of us decided that we needed to show people that if you put all of our forces combined and all of the tools that we had combined together, we could make bigger things and we could make very exciting things if the departments were to work together. And so we started in 2000, I believe it was 2012 into 2013. We started a class called the Art of the Moving Creature, which now has a type, it has an iteration now that Steve is still teaching. And I said, we need to bring in experts and we need to go for grants and we need to go big. We need to go big or go home because we want to make an impact. We want to show people what making on UVA grounds is really like, or what it can be like. And so we got a grant from the office of the VPA, the Vice Provost of the Arts, and we brought in 8 artists from Hollywood. Here are some of them, talking with students. Some of them have Oscars. Some of them you probably would have seen as a puppeteer, whether they were in Jurassic Park or in Terminator or in Predator. They all worked at a group called the Stan Winston School or Stan Winston Shop of Character Arts. And Stan Winston was kind of the genius behind all of the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park, Terminator, the Aflac duck, a lot of the characters of Hollywood that we know and love. And he was a UVA alum. He was in the studio art department. And when he passed a few years before this class, his son got all of his making friends together and made the Stan Winston School of Character Arts, which you can still go on and get videos from, to learn how to do everything from animatronics to puppeteering to flocking and making hair and fur onto characters. Whatever the movie magic it is that you want to learn, they'll show you how to do it. And so they came to UVA, and we had about 60 students over the year in 7 different departments and schools learning how to make things. And we started by making things out of trash bags and PVC pipe and foam. It didn't have to be anything extremely technical. Billy Bryan is the one on the bottom right. I was saying the trash bag technologist. That was using a heating element and that same painter's plastic I was using in the Physicists. He makes a living by making inflatables out of this plastic and using them in film. And he does quite amazing work. And so we made large moving puppets or creatures that really were at the nexus of what all of our students were talking about. You want to talk about structure. That meant slightly different things, but actually the same thing to people who were in architecture, who were in biomedical engineering, who were in, if we were talking skins, again, same in between architecture or the set designers and tech directors in drama and the people who were kind of learning that in biology. And so the students had a common language in which to speak, and we started to build 5 large moving creatures. We decided we needed to go at least the size of a bus. This is Winston attacking one of the UVA buses on one of our night walks. And this was the crew that puppeted it in the class, the very first version of the class. We taught it for a full year. So it was in the fall and then again in the spring. And we even grew bigger in the spring. And we said, well, if we're going to grow bigger in the spring, let's go bigger. Why not? Why not have 26 people puppet this one creature and then have 4 more of them where that came from? And so we paraded around grounds. 1,000 people came from all over the country And those weren't just parents and family members and friends of the people in the class. This is people who were putting it out there. We had a marketing, we had a student in the arts admin department and major who was coordinating all of the marketing events for this. She did an amazing job. And so people started coming, and some people who didn't know it was loud enough that people heard it. We were working with a large arts administration class who provided various entertainment during the parade. One of them brought the parkour team, and they were playing with some of the creatures at that scale. We had a music class create all of the sounds, and they had little carts that they would follow each one of the creatures, and they had a full soundtrack and a full voice. And we had people in the community who were just participating. They were dressing up themselves. And it just became this huge celebration of making these large-scale moving creatures that really did have a life to them, and were being taught by the Hollywood artists, by dancers, by that was the semester that Pilobolus, a very famous dance company, came to UVA to do a show. And before their show, we showed them one of the puppets, and they said, "Let's dance with it. Let's show you how to get this puppet to be angry, how to get it to be happy. You know, when there's 24 of you making this happen, how do you coordinate seamlessly to make it roll over like a small dog?" And all of that was something that we had to play with, and it was a super amazing experience. Nessie is on the left, and Fatty is on the right, the half mechanical creature, half elephant. And it was really over 100 people by the end of this class. And this was the final. This was their final, is that they had to make and they had to perform with it and make it very public. And so from there, whenever I taught, I made sure that I was bringing in people from the community, from various industries, and making it as interdisciplinary as possible. All of my classes were open not only to the whole School of Architecture undergrads and grads, but to anyone at the university. So there were people from the college, people from engineering, people from every which way in this coming to class and bringing their expertise to the table. So you frequently had electrical engineers who were like, "Let me figure out how to build that robotic end effector," and a person from the English department was like, "I've never done any of this before, but what I can do is start to build this narrative of how this then gets applied to and used by a group of people." So this was a studio that I taught with Casey Kerrigan of Osh shoes. We were 3D printing. At the time, she wasn't 3D printing shoes, but she wanted to get into it. And so I taught a seminar, and then I taught a studio with her. And the woman that you see with the curly blonde hair in the top pictures is Maggie, who is now hired by Osh. This is now her full-time job, is working with Casey on building 3D printers for shoes, and currently are actually 3D printing the same TPU material as for an N95-like mask or respirator. And they've been doing a lot of fit testing with the fire department on whether or not these types of respirators would be a good solution to the lack of N95s that we have right now. Part of the studio, if you've ever been to one of the School of Architecture's final exams, they're not exams, they're reviews. They're very public. You put up all of your work and then people talk about it. For us, we decided that the best way of showing off our shoes that we had been making and testing was to do a fashion show. And so in one of our spaces upstairs, we kind of commandeered the tables, and we had a very loud, very fun and energy-filled fashion show. And then we were talking about the very real implications of the footwear that we have, that we 3D printed on the joints of the body. They had all been tested using force plates that one of the labs over at the old Klugeru Children's Hospital had and was testing kind of gait and walking patterns and forces on the knee. And then we got this guy. This is Carl. He's a 6-axis robot. So I was saying earlier that 3-axis router moves in X, Y, and Z. Now we start to say, well, you can turn around the X-axis, you can turn around the Y-axis, and you can turn around the Z-axis. It's very much like your arm. There's 2 axes in the shoulder, 2 in the elbow and forearm, and then 2 in the wrist, right? And then you can put anything you want on as a hand. And that hand could be something like a extruder. It could be something like a router. It could be something like a large hot wire bow. And the very first thing we did with it was we put it in our van. This is my TA Blue. And about 12 of us went down to Virginia Tech, where the University of Tennessee, Knoxville had also put their small robot into a van and brought it to Tech so that the robots had friends. And together we had about a 35-person workshop where we were working through how do you start to use small and large robots in architecture and construction. What are the kinds of tools that you need? What are the kinds of applications that would be applicable for at a small scale, at a large scale? And so we were, the very first time, we were cutting foam with a hot wire. So the wire is electrified and it kind of just cuts right through the foam itself, the block of foam. And you can see on the right that there's a large column that was made by just pulling those pieces apart of the large block that the robot is dealing with and cutting through. And they get flipped around using a different pattern. And we were making full-scale prototypes. We then went from there and I taught a series of classes where we put everything from a pen to a clay extruder to a concrete extruder to a light for long exposure photography to a hot wire bow on the end of our small robot. And these have just continued to grow. We have faculty members now who this is their expertise as well. And together students are routing lumber and making full-scale prototypes of building techniques to designing how you 3D print off-plane with the robot. So if you think of your 3D printers, it always layers up like frosting on a cake, and that's great. But it's not really 3-dimensional. It's 2-dimensional with thickness, and you just keep doing 2-dimensional actions with thickness over and over and over until you get a 3D object. But what if you actually started to print spatially? So you could actually use the robot. If you imagine kind of picking your pen off of the table and saying, all right, well, that's now a line, and then I move, and that's another line. And you start to create kind of a larger lattice work of structure. And that could be really useful and very cost efficient and time efficient if you could make that on an actual construction site. So these classes kind of led to a research group forming. And one of the members of the research group was named Carolina Myers. Carolina came from the media studies department. She had transferred into UVA after 2 years of community college and joined media studies because she thought the word media meant physical. And she got there and she realized she really loved it. She was doing all sorts of things with film and with other sorts of analysis and things like that. But what she really wanted to do was something physical. So she joined the robot class on a whim, not knowing anything about it. And she learned how to code, she learned how to model, and she learned how to start to play with materials. And their group started with Ferrofluid. Does everyone know what Ferrofluid or have seen Ferrofluid is? It's using iron shavings, so a ferromagnetic material, suspended in like an oil or some sort of carrier liquid that then when you put a magnet in or underneath this liquid, it will create spikes. It will show you the magnetic field that is being created through the magnet. All of the iron shavings will line up and it will create these spiky balls. And Carolina came to me at the end of one of these where they had used a magnet on the end of the robot to kind of make the ferrofluid dance in a funny way. She said, I want to make it structural. Can I make this architectural? I'm not in the School of Architecture, but I want to make it architectural. I think it'd be useful. And I was like, I believe in that. I think that's great. And so she and I became partners for the next 2 years of building this project called Freezing the Field, or ferrostructures, where instead of using an oil or a liquid, we used a resin that would harden, and we used the robot with a magnet on the end of it to create it. I'll see if these actually go. We'll see if this, maybe not. See if this will do it. Sorry, I might have to go out of full screen and go back into it to make it work, but we'll see. Will it do it? No. Let's see. If it doesn't, it's okay. There's lots of cool pictures to come. All right. Well, what you would have seen is us pouring out of a cup this black fluid that made kind of a bridge in between those two magnets. And we did a whole series of these that were building up into these structures that we then wanted to be able to structurally test. And so we were able to go and connect with people over at the Virginia Department of Transportation Research Center, which is at UVA, and structurally test some of this work, where we then could get them to do testing like they would concrete and say, how much PSI are we actually working with? Is this a material that we could actually make structural and use instead of using some sort of concrete? We tested by putting it underwater. So you can see on the left the two magnets and the bridges that are created between them. And water doesn't care if there's a magnetic field. Space doesn't care if there's a magnetic field. And so we were trying to say, could we actually test this and create structures in places that is very difficult to make other types of structures like concrete and whatnot? Could we send this up into space? Could we do this under the ocean? And I think the answer, I mean, underwater, yes. Up in space, it would be a little bit more cost prohibitive to get the materials out there, but once it's out there, the magnets would work great. And so we were building for the robot this magnet holder tool, and a little ball that had a neodymium magnet in it. And I just don't think these are going to play. Ooh, it is great. So you can see that the material is going between the magnet that the robot's holding and the base. And so it's turning it, and then it's going to kind of harden it by pulling it into place and leaving it there for a couple of minutes while the resin sets up, and then it will release itself from that joint and then move to the next spot. I think that's all the videos I have, so I'll go back full screen. So we were making structures that look like this, which look like maybe structures, maybe not, but and structures that look like this. Then we started doing some helixes that were creating some really nice structures. And really, this was kind of building out the tool and building out a material. So then as designers, we could say, all right, then what do we want to do with it? So how do we then give this into the hands of designers to say, all right, if this is possible, what is the new type of design that you would do with it? Could you make this big enough where this could just be a bridge? Is this something where it could be smaller components? Could it actually fix components within structures that are failing? Because all you need is two magnets instead of a lot of formwork in order to cast concrete. So there were just all of these questions that we started bringing up, and And it was a whole team of people. It wasn't just Carolina and I, but a whole team of people giving us feedback, a whole team of people who were saying, we're a material science expert. We are a magnet expert. We are the structural experts. And getting everyone in a room and saying, how do we use this as a way of moving forward with design and with materials and robots in construction, which is a newer type of concept. So I think the biggest thing before I get to the last part, about all of these projects is that it's definitely a team effort. It's like, what does it take to be a maker professionally? What it takes is just that spirit to connect with people, to say, I don't know, but you know, so let's be friends. You have tools that I want to use, let's use them. Let's make a team, let's connect a bridge. And from that, then we can actually start to create something that is better than any of us could create within ourselves. And so that leads me to the PPE project that we are currently involved with. Very early on, before spring break, or just around spring break, a group of makers from around Maker Grounds started saying, we're seeing people start to 3D print things around the world needed for the COVID-19 efforts. PPE, personal protective equipment, is becoming very low in numbers for our medical professionals. We have the ability to make things. Why don't we make them and give them to our professionals? And so very early on, a number of makers from around UVA and doctors and nurses from our medical center and others started connecting and saying, what is it that the need is, and how do we find that need, and what can we do to help? And so this is a picture of 1 week after there was a flurry of activity. These are the leaders of each product area that we were working in. And they came from all different places around UVA. So there were some engineering professors and staff. There were some community members. There were friends who were in industry. This is me talking about face shields, and Dr. Tyson Bell giving me the thumbs up because he liked the design. Environmental health and safety professionals from the university who wanted to actually physically test things so that if we were giving it to the hospital, we could say with some sort of confidence this would work. We're not giving false confidence to our medical professionals. And we have Darden MBA's students who are developing more accurate, what are called burn algorithms or burn models for going through or burning through the PPE at the hospital. So I believe it's the NIH or the CDC has a burn model for hospitals to say, here's how much PPE we have, here's how many patients we're getting in, here's kind of a model of telling us how long we can survive with the PPE that we have, or are we already out? And they were making some that were really more attuned to the kind of ways that our supply chain was actually working in our supply room at UVA. And so each of these groups were representing different processes that we were using, or different, I'm sorry, not processes, but different materials, different PPE that we wanted to use. And so we had Nancy and Jonathan Rosen working on a face mask. You see a lot of different people coming out with sewn face masks. It was something that the nurses at the hospital in the middle, her name is Jessica, she's a bedside nurse, and she's the one who actually asked for this whole group to get together weeks ago. She saw the writing on the wall and said, we need to get the makers involved now, and said, what can we do? Give me a prototype, because people are just sewing things, but we don't know if it's actually safe. We don't know if it's what it's helping. And so Nancy, who's an expert sewer, put together many different prototypes and we had it fit tested with environmental health and safety. We had people at the hospital testing them for fit, and they came up with something that they really, really like, and works better than some of the other sewn masks that are out there. All of them are better than nothing. So I'm not trying to put down any PPE efforts here, but it was something that we were testing and we were seeing were really helpful and giving a lot of confidence for the people who were on our front lines that needed it. On the right was one of Gavin Garner from engineering, one of his very first tries at making an N95-like mask. So how many of you have seen the 3D printing N95 type mask efforts? You might see it on social media or online. A few of you are like, yeah. So an N95 mask, like those ones that look like they're out of paper, are 14 square inches. Yep, Isabella's holding one up right now. Looks great. It is 14 square inches of amazing, magical electrostatic blown polypropylene that is capturing polypropylene or polyethylene? Now I'm forgetting exactly, don't quote me on it. I guess this is recorded, but it's a material you can look up. And it's capturing very small microns of aerosol particulate, where if someone's coughing or they're even breathing, that would get into your face or in your eyes, that you would contract the virus. And an N95 pulls out 95% of all of that particulate. Great. We're running out of them. So people are printing them, but there's a few problems with printing them. They were printing them with really, really small holes in the front, like 1 inch by 1 inch holes. That means you have 1 or 2 or 4 square inches of filter as opposed to 14 square inches of filter. 3D printing plastic usually is not watertight. Even though our models are watertight, the layers in between those pieces are not always watertight. And so there could still be air that's getting filtered or coming through the plastic itself. And so Gavin came up with one where he scanned his face, and it fit nicely around his face, kind of using some technology from the OSH from Casey Carrigan, who's 3D printing out of a rubber material that can kind of be printed flat, but then fold up onto your face. He was printing it as like a gasket around your face. And then he had this holder where you could easily slip in a filter and then unclip it and take it out. And that filter was going to be something like 8 square inches or 10 square inches of filter. And the air was then going to be expelled behind your head. So it'd be easier to breathe. He's gone through hundreds of prototypes at this point to see what we can do. And they're still testing them. We're not kind of in need at the moment yet of this sort of respirator, but we're getting there. UVA was very early to developing a test for COVID, but what they were going to run out of were swabs. The nasopharyngeal swabs that you put all the way into the back of your nose, all the way to your back of your throat. It's not the most comfortable if you've ever had this done to you, but you need something that's flexible, that isn't going to break, that goes all the way there. And the swab supply chain was just broken down around the world. You couldn't get cotton swabs that were this long and this flexible for this purpose, but we needed to do the testing. And so very quickly, everyone was 3D printing, 3D printing examples. We were trying to 3D print, examples of these swabs and then see if we could actually get like cotton to go around them and get them flocked. That's what it's called. And so we've recently sent it away. We've gone from 3D printing to injection molding, which is making a metal mold and injecting it with plastic. And we got it sent away, and now they're making thousands of them and getting them flocked. And that was something that Maker Ground started with very early on. We've been 3D printing those band extenders for the masks, the surgical masks that go around your ears. And people are wearing those masks for their entire shift. So 8 to 12 hours with elastic rubbing behind your ears, which is just rubbing it raw. And so a Boy Scout came up with this design, a 12-year-old Boy Scout, put it out on the internet. We said, that sounds great. We can print those. We can water jet those. And so we started, I think they delivered 3,000. Fung is on the Slack channel for this as well, but I think it was about 3,000 a couple days ago to UVA and Martha Jefferson and a number of other nursing facilities, which has been wildly helpful to the efforts. And on the left is a version, as of this morning, of an intubation box. One of the problems when you put in a breathing tube is that people will, a lot of particulate will come out of the mouth and out of the throat. And if you are positive with COVID, you are then putting that into a room with a lot of medical professionals who then have to completely redon PPE after that, because it's considered, it's been exposed. And so can you put some sort of flat sheet of plastic that you can quickly kind of fold up into a either very easily washable or just tossable intubation box that could really help the medical professionals who are in that room, the nurses, the doctors, the technicians, as someone is being intubated. And so we're testing some full scale ones that will go to the hospital in Martha Jeff soon. And then I'm on the team doing face shields. Face shields are kind of one of those really easy ones to make, but they do help prolong the length of time that a medical grade mask or goggle could be worn. And they protect kind of the rest of the face, while goggles are just kind of around the eyes and the mask is just around the nose and mouth. And so very quickly, we tried a few different prototypes, 3D printing, just hot gluing some foam onto some plastic. And the doctors liked the one with the foam. They liked wearing it for a longer period of time. It fit a lot of different head shapes and sizes well. And so we've been producing them with a community of people. As I said, being a roller derby person has been really helpful because my entire roller derby team is like, how can we help? It's those people, those friends that you're gonna get by making a network of people from all around wherever you land in a new city. The best piece of advice I've ever gotten was when you get into a new city, if you're just friends with other architects, you're not gonna get any work because you're all architects, you're all gonna do work for yourself. You want to be friends with as many different people as possible. So join a team, join a club, join wherever your favorite restaurant has a group of people who are constant regulars. Join some group that is going to give you some roots in your community so that when you need it, you can activate them as a network. And all of my friends, all of my neighbors are like, give us stuff to do. So in the last 7 days, we have gone from sheets of plastic to water jetting sheets of plastic over at engineering, and kind of doing the main logistical hub out of the School of Architecture. We've gone from pounds of plastic, raw plastic and shock cord and foam, to over 3,000 face shields out the door to UVA, Martha Jefferson, and 13 other nursing facilities, the University Police Department, and others who have needed face shields, which is pretty amazing. We're trying to go to 10,000. We should probably hit that by next week as we ramp up, and that's kind of what we've been up to. So we were delivering to Martha Jeff earlier this week, and Tyson, Dr. Bell at UVA was really excited. We gave him all of these bags that he's going to go deliver as like the face shield Santa Claus of the UVA hospital, which will be super fun. And so, yeah, that's, I'll stop sharing. See my face, make sure you're all here. And that is, that's what I wanted to show you today. I know I talked for a long time and probably more than I was supposed to, but I would love to take any questions that you have or kind of get into a discussion about any of these topics. But I think the question that was asked to me is like, how did you get into this? Is that you can get into it from anywhere. And the key thing is to kind of find the other makers that are around you and the other people who have skills and recognize that they have those skills and not only learn from them, but use them as experts. Bring them into your team so that when someone says, hey, do you have someone who can do that? You'd be like, yeah, I have someone who can do that. Or can we share? Yes, we can. I think that's how you break down barriers and you make things accessible, and you start making as a professional, no matter what department, what field, what background you have. There are people who can help in every way, shape, and form, and recognizing that as part of your team, I think, is really critical to success. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa, for your talk. I'm always amazed at the work you do over the architecture school, but as well as just like you said, the amount of friends you have across the campus, that you form this, maker community. Now we call it Maker Grounds, and you're the leading force of, connecting everyone together. And we're on agenda to, share our resources and, help each other, especially now that the forces of helping making the PPE is a wonderful, just wonderful to see that is happening right now. I think now I'm gonna just open this for students, especially my fellows, asking questions. Do you have any questions you want to ask Melissa about?
What questions do you have for me, everyone? Or comments? Be any of it?
Yeah.
Specifically, I don't really have any questions because I thought you were pretty thorough in all of your descriptions, but I'm just like intrigued of how much you've accomplished in such a short amount of time. I wanted to really thank you for being a part of like the greater effort and helping all of these like health professionals. I just think it's like a really big project, and it's really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been certainly really fun. So that's really helped. And when you find a project that you really like, it's really easy to kind of dive deeply into it and to get really passionate about it and enjoy it. So I hope you all find that project for yourself. Because I'll ask you all the question. I mean, what kind of projects have you been intrigued by that you've been part of at UVA so far that has really started to change the way that you think about making or your career or whatnot?
Georgia, you want to ask a question?
Oh, yeah, I was pretty much going to say what Izzy said. Thank you for speaking with us. I just think what you've done, especially with the PPE, is so cool. And I think it's so cool when you realize like how many different people from different types of fields go into like making it all happen.
Yeah.
And I guess I did have a question about I thought the magnetic material you were talking about was super cool. I was wondering when you were showing it to us, I'm in like a strength of materials class, like
oh, nice.
how long it is once it hardens.
Say that again.
How strong is the material once it hardens and sets?
Sure. So when we did the structural testing, of which we would like to do more of it, we crushed a few cubes and we were pretty excited about it because that's not something we're normally doing. But because it's resin, it actually doesn't break like regular concrete would break in some sort of regular curve that would just go up and up and up and then have a catastrophic failure. The resin works more like a plastic material, so it crushes and it rebounds. And so sometimes that rebound is actually stronger than the original material it is itself. But we were getting about in between 5,000 and 6,000 PSI, pounds per square inch, which is not as good as kind of a traditional concrete, let's say, but is quite typical for certain types of plastics and resins. But what we were trying to see is if resin with the iron particulate in it, just kind of floating around, was going to be weaker than if we lined up all of the particulate with the magnets. And so we hypothesized that if we had strings of that iron going through it, that would be stronger. And it was a little bit stronger. Now, a little bit meant like a couple hundred PSI, which could be just that we need more testing, or it could mean that is actually going towards a direction that is in fact stronger. But it was not so weak that we got laughed out of the room, where they're like, oh, this is cute and is an art project and couldn't be stood upon or used in some sort of structural capacity. So I think it really does depend on the next level of what is the application that someone would want to use this material in. And then we could say, all right, for that application, are we then comparing to concrete? Are we comparing to steel, which we wouldn't be able to do? Are we comparing to a different type of plastic? And I think then we can start to adjust the ratio of resin to ferro material and a number of other things that we're doing.
Okay, thank you. I just thought it was cool. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you use it, but it's sweet.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited about different applications, whether that would be kind of like a film industry, like trick. You like activate a magnet and then everything spikes and holds. Or if it was something that you could actually send to space. Or if all of those spikes actually create more surface area for something to grow upon, whether that's underwater. That was kind of the initial test for the underwater stuff, or for a different purpose. And so I think that's just the next step in the research, is figuring out what the application is of those spikes, because it is something that you can't get with any other material. We tried, that ferro material with concrete. We tried it with like a putty. We tried it with plaster, like other things that you could cast and they get hard, and it just doesn't create those spikes like the resin does. So, yeah.
So Melissa, I do have a question that I have always wanted to ask you, because one is I have you that I have a ton of toys to play with at your facility.
Yeah.
But on the other side, and I feel overwhelmed by the amount of technology you have and be able to manage all of them. And I think, something I only want to ask is how you manage, to learn all of these. And because I think that's also probably questions that my fellows have as well, because when reading about their learning journals, when they come to learn a new technology, and then they often have this fear of learning something new, especially a lot of these technologies like your cool robots look cute but also intimidating maybe to a lot of the students. Yeah, so I guess one is how you overcome those fears of learning these new technology, as well as some tips for mastering these technology.
Sure, great question. So yeah, how do you manage it all? I eat a lot of ice cream, I think, is how I sometimes manage it all. But no, it's I think for me it's knowing when I'm going into something that there are places to get information, and that I have to take time to dedicate myself very deeply to something in order to then learn it. It's like trying to learn a language. It's like trying to parse a very tough piece of text. It's like trying to learn or master a sonata for cello. It's something that you're just going to have to practice at. And so I think the first thing is it's hard to say because we all feel it in some way. It's like, don't worry about feeling stupid about it. ask the questions. What was so great over the last year, so I was the single manager of the lab for about 9 years, and this past year I got a co-person on my team, which I was so excited about, to hire another brain. And Trevor's background, Trevor Kemp is my assistant manager, and he graduated with his PhD from UVA in mechanical engineering. And his background is underwater robots in Hillary Bart Smith's lab. And I was really excited to have Trevor as part of the team, because something that was not my background and I was struggling in learning were kind of a lot of the electrical and sensor side of things that I just did not understand. Motors, some of the more mechanical engineering kind of work that you really needed to understand in order to start putting some of these like robotic end effectors together, let us say, and to fix some of the tools that we have, just were a little bit out of my grasp. And I think the first thing for me was, don't be intimidated by anyone else's knowledge. Like, they have that knowledge just like you have knowledge in something. They just want to share it. So even if you're asking what you think is a dumb question, it's not a dumb question. And they'll be excited to show you. Like, even if it's starting from the beginning, like, how do you turn this on? That's okay. And I think for me, it's getting over those barriers initially of saying, that doesn't make sense. And whatnot. I think that's the first way of being able to learn these tools, and to then say, all right, I'm no longer just learning the basics. Now I want to go one step beyond. So let me take it apart and put it back together again. Let me run a few tests on this type of 3D printer over and over again, so that I just get through that barrier, which I recognize is not a physical barrier, it's a mental barrier of saying, oh, when I press go, is everything going to be okay? Is it going to explode? I don't know. And you realize that no, it's not. Well, it's probably not going to explode, but that you, as soon as you do it once, the second time gets easier and the third time gets easier. And so I think doing it 10 times, and this is something I've started with my TAs, is when they say, oh, I don't really actually know that tool very well, I've used it once. I'm like, well, for the next hour, you're just going to cut on that tool over and over and over and over again until they feel comfortable. And that's the way to get over that initial barrier and to ask questions. And then I think managing it, it's going back to it, knowing that you have to practice. So if you learn how to 3D print something on a 3D printer and then you go away for a long time, I always find that when I go back to it, that mental barrier's back. I'm like, oh, did I remember how to press all the buttons so that it doesn't blow up? And I have to remind myself, not only is it not going to blow up, but if it does, you know how to take it apart and put it back together again. And you have people who will help you to make that happen. And I think that goes for whether it's the robot or it's the jointer or the table saw, or it's a new 3D printer, or it's a hand chisel, like any of those things. And that you're always open to learning new techniques. So in training, I even say, like, we're going to say that you have experience or maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. If you have a question or you want to bring something in and you say, I think I know a better way, I am glad to hear it. Even if you think that I am an expert, it takes thousands of hours to be an expert. And I don't even feel that for most of the things that I do. And that's okay, because I want to learn. And so I would say that's a really great way of kind of getting over that barrier, and managing and practicing and keeping that up as a language, as a set of things that you feel confident in and have a relationship with, I think is really important. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for your suggestion. Yeah, that's wonderful. Anyone else has any questions you want to ask?
I had a question. Yeah. I was wondering if you had any suggestions for students or anyone, I guess, that wants to do make something or create something or do something like we have a little bit of this semester left, or maybe into the summer, now that there's not really access to maker spaces. So what kinds of things can people do just at home that can kind of
Sure.
get flowing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many ways that so many abilities to make, even in your own home, whether you have tools or you don't. If you do have access to tools, use them. So maybe a family member or a neighbor has tools and you can get them and you can make something. That could be as simple as a birdhouse or as complicated as a new addition onto your house, which I'm sure all of your families would just love for you to do. Get a permit, maybe, or if it's something that it's more in the smaller scale crafting realm, whether you're like, hey, I want to pick up how to knit. This is something that you can order online if you don't have it, or you can find. There's a lot of places now that are doing kind of free swaps of stuff you can find in your neighborhood, whether that's on social media or on Craigslist or something. Always be safe, but you could probably get yourself, whether it's I had a friend, she's like, I want to learn some new skills of things that I want to do. And you're like, all right, well, what do you want to make? And for her, it was knitting and crocheting. For another person, it was baking. Cooking and baking are actually really amazing. I mean, they are making, and it's a great analog for some of the, or a great parallel analog to some of the things that we do working with materials. So recipes, if you're in like a material strengths class, Georgia, or I don't know if you were doing any sort of physical work kind of in the lab in that class, but just understanding what all of the ingredients do for bread or cookies or something like that is actually like a very deep science that you could get really into and take a lot of time and iterate on. And failures are sweet in that case if you're making cookies. So it sounds kind of weird to say like get into baking and get into cooking, but it is something that people are doing right now. Another thing is to get into the efforts in your community with PPE. There's a lot of different communities, I'm sure, in every city that people are trading materials, they're trading tools. People are swapping sewing machines if people have time and they're, cleaning it off and whatnot and taking materials from people. But this is how we're getting through it together, is that people are donating their time and donating skills or learning skills. And there's so much online right now to learn how to make a mask, to learn how to make whatever it might be. The kind of intubation box that Trevor and I are working on right now can be origamied with just paper and cutting it and putting it together and getting it into the hands of people who are like, what do you do? Like, how do I make this bigger? Can I actually move my hands in it? And that might take a little bit more coordination with like an actual doctor or professional or nurse. But if you know of people, you're like, hey, I really want to learn those efforts, reach out to us, reach out to Fong and I, and we can get you on the Slack, or we can connect you to the leader of that group and say, hey, we have someone with an idea, or they would love to hear your idea on this, for their community, or do you know somebody over in that state or whatever. And there also are a lot of things online that are opening up right now. Especially if you have a .edu email address. So the entire Adobe Creative Cloud, I think right now, there are free ways of getting those softwares, which you don't normally have access to, and then tutorials to learn from them. Autodesk is always free. So if you're wanting to learn how to model to 3D print, there's a lot you can do before you actually go to the 3D printer. It's good to know about the 3D printer before you do that. But getting all those tutorials and learning how to master the modeling part, so that later, if you're like, oh, I need to actually make this part that's great. And if you're having trouble with access to a computer that can run it, let me know. Happy to see if we can share some virtual resources there. And if there's something that you then want to print, you're like, hey, could someone throw this on a printer for me and send it to me? Like, send me an email. For any of you fellows, I'd be happy to run something on our Lulzbots or our Stratasys and then ship it to you wherever you are. We're doing that for some of our students, and we're able to keep doing it. So, let me know if there's something. But there's masterclass right now in Stan Winston School if you want to learn how to make an animatronic leopard head or whatever it is that you're trying to make. Those are all available to you. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thanks so much. I think we're running out of time, but I'm just so grateful for your talk, Melissa. I felt like if I listened to your talk in college, I probably would switch my major to the architecture school. So maybe some of my fellows feel the same way. I felt like you probably will steal some friends, students from the STEM to the architecture school, and then they
Come
should
and be Fab Lab friends with us. We would love that.
Yes.
And so for any of you that are coming back next semester, hopefully we will be in person, and hopefully we will be running short courses, and all of those short courses are available to you. So I know if some of you have taken them or taken the initial one for Woodshop, but we have ones for laser cutters. The ones that we did with laser cutters this past semester, we were etching people's photos on chocolate bars. So it was something that was just getting you through the programs and getting you through the buttons, but we want you to run it. And we have other ones from, sewing and embroidery to using the CNC router. So stay tuned for those. And if you're moving to a city, you're graduating and moving to a different city, there is a maker community. Find them. Sign up for their listserv. Say who is doing this stuff. And then there's always people who are wanting help or wanting to learn, and they're excited to be friends with you there. So yeah, good luck.
That's
with that.
great. Yeah, thanks so much. And also, I know you just asked questions to the fellows about what they are making. We were gonna have a final showcase in May, and I will definitely invite you to the final showcase. And also, Donna, if you're interested. And we also do a recording if you're unable to make it, and then post it online. So yeah.
That would be fantastic. I would love to see it. And if anybody has questions as they're making stuff, feel free to email me, goldman@virginia.edu, just my last name. Or if you can't remember that, fablab@virginia.edu gets you to me and to Trevor. So you can ask us any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. So we're going to stay for our meeting.
Good. All right. Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
so much. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
You too.